Want to keep your dollars and cents? Then download the Sense app from the Office of Financial Readiness. That's Sense, S-E-N, money sign, E, to save for retirement, build credit, create a spending plan, or buying a home. You can't do any of those things without money. So if you have sense, you'll download the Sense app. That's S-E-N, money sign, E, today. And be sure to follow at DoD FinRed on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And welcome to another Fast Take, the last Fast Take for this season. I'm Rod Rodriguez.
Hey, I'm Jack Murphy.
And we are here to kind of like do our season wrap up. This has been an interesting season. You know, the thing about the show is when Jack and I figure out, we start doing like the storyboarding for the season, it's always kind of like, well, we got to kind of figure out what's going on during that time frame as well, because, you know, we want to make sure these stories are relevant to you. And when we start the season, I don't think either one of us really understood what or how significant Afghanistan was going to be to making these stories. And a lot of what we did, especially at the tail end of this, had a lot to do with the evacuation in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean, when usually I start off just suggesting to you, various topics that I think are interesting, but then, as you say, events unfold in real time as we're producing the show, and we try to flex to, what's topical, what's on people's minds, what matters to the military and to veterans at this moment. And yeah, Afghanistan was one of the big ones.
When we did this last couple of parts, and I'm gonna kind of take us back a little bit slowly through the season. What kind of stood out to you about the Afghan evacuation stories that we did? We talked with Save Our Allies. We talked with the Pineapple Express. We talked with Mick Mulroy about the CIA's involvement in the whole evacuation process. But what stood out to you, Jack?
I think the thing that really stood out to me, and I think is probably relevant to our audience, is that within this horrible, tragic moment, there was also something beautiful that took place, in the sense that I saw something happen with military veterans that I don't think I'd really seen before, where everyone kind of came together and was working together and happy to work together to do something positive. And I've never seen anything quite like that before. There are veterans all over America and beyond doing amazing things. But to kind of see them unify behind one issue like this and advocate and fight so powerfully for this certain issue for evacuating Afghan allies was something I'd never seen before. And I think that it speaks to something. It speaks to a potential that, imagine if we were always like that. And I mean, that's kind of a fantasy. I realize we will never be like that every day, and we have our weak moments as well. But I mean, imagine if we strove for that sort of, I hate to use the word like unity, because we're never truly unified. Americans are too rambunctious for that. But if we were all striving to do something good at the same time, to work towards a common goal like that, I think America would be a very different country.
I completely agree with you on everything you just said, honestly. It was surprising to me. I didn't know some of this. I knew a little bit about the story about the civilians that had been part of the evacuation process, but I think what got to me was the passion. This wasn't like we're going to throw a couple of ideas together and, we'll see how this works out. These were people who were so passionate about saving their friends. And then this became more about, well, there are other people that need this help.
Yeah, and they weren't waiting for permission, nor were they simply expressing an emotion. They weren't kind of wallowing in self-pity or saying, look at me, look at me. They weren't waiting for anyone to say, okay, it's all right for you to do this now. They just organized on their own and jumped right in and started doing things. And I think that's what made this movement, if you will, different than many of the others that we see in society. It wasn't just, hey, we're going to take to the streets and make our thoughts known. It was, no, we're going to get actively involved. We're going to become active participants in trying to help other people. So that was just fascinating to see. And I think, the interviews we did with the different people who were involved, it was just fascinating to see that sort of like self-organization, how it happened like so organically. And I was actually on one of these groups that exists today, a different group than even the ones we interviewed. They invited me on to be a part of their Zoom call yesterday, where they're actually hashing out operational details, continuing to get Afghan allies who worked with the special operations community out of the country. And that work continues to this day. I was there listening to them as they talked, hey, we got this guy. How do we move this forward? How do we move that forward? And I mean, it really is just really impressive to see it happen.
So one of the issues that came about from the Afghan evacuation, really, it all boils down to us leaving the country the way that we did. There was a lot of heartache, a lot of heartburn about our withdrawal. During, Jack and I usually, talk a lot before we do these recordings. And one of the topics of conversation that we were talking about before we hit the record button was the heartache that comes with this evacuation process. And a lot of veterans have been very vocal about feeling betrayed, about feeling like all was for nothing and whatnot. But then there's also the other side to this that, we did 20 years of work in a country that had probably never really seen this level of assistance before. They have been conquered. This is a land that has been conquered in the past, a land that's been invaded. But I think that what the United States did was a little different. Yes, we were there. We occupied the land. But I think that what we did differently than anyone else that had ever come before us was, I think there was a legit concern for these people. There was a legit desire to help them be better, do better, bring them into today's world. And whether or not we did it the right way or how we left, I mean, those things will be argued for years to come. But I think our intent was good. And, I do think that there's something to be said about the story's not done. It's not written. There's no end yet. I think that there's a lot more to our involvement in Afghanistan than just we're done. I think there's more to be written. Jack, what do you think?
Well, I saw a video recently that Tom Spooner put on Instagram. He's a retired operator, a pretty articulate guy, and helps out veterans through an organization called Warrior's Heart. And he was speaking to this subject, to the withdrawal from Afghanistan and what had transpired over the last year. And I think something really important that he said was that I define what my military service means to me. And he was encouraging other veterans out there to also think about that your military service doesn't mean what anyone else thinks it means. It doesn't, what the government thinks your military service means to you is not important. What the media thinks about your military service is not important. That you get to define what that means to you. And that could take on many different forms. When I think about my own military service, I'm going to use myself as an example here, just because I think everyone's experience is particular to themselves. And I don't want to just go against what I just said and try to define anyone else's service. For me, I look back on the relationships and the friendships I made and that we were trying to serve our country and trying to prevent another 9/11 type attack from happening to America, to beat back terrorism. And our hearts were in the right place. We hope that we could establish some sort of democracy in some of these countries, although we were wrong. Let's just call that what it is. But I think one of the enduring things that sticks with me is the relationship that I made with the Iraqi soldiers that I trained, and that as a young man, a young American soldier, I think and I hope that I was able to give them a positive impression of America, and that when they think about our country and our military, that they have a good impression and good experiences and good memories of working with Americans. So I think that all of the other service members out there who are upset about how we withdrew from Afghanistan should also think about that and really, I don't know, take some time and reflect on what their military service does mean to them individually and personally. Big picture and little picture, what does it mean politically? What does it mean for you on a more personal, interpersonal level, as far as like your friendships and relationships, or the things you learned, or the skills you learned, and the life lessons you took away from that experience? Because there's lots of negatives. Like Rod, you and I have certainly talked about negative experiences from our military service. But it's not all negative by any means. There's a lot of positive things I think we all took away from it as well.
100%. Lots of positives, and I think that's one of the things that I think the media gets accused of that a lot, is that we don't focus enough on the positive stories. We talk a lot about the negative stuff, but at the same time, we've done positive stories, and be honest with you, they're the ones that nobody listens to.
That's true. That's true.
That's the ugly reality. I think we did a story on not about 2 seasons ago. We did a story about the Soldier of the Year, NCO of the Year, and it was probably one of the worst ratings we've ever had. People look at that like, eh. But if I tell you, hey, special operations guy kills family, boom, everyone wants to know about that. It's just the ugly truth of reality. People will always migrate towards the negative stories. But my career, 20 years, ups and downs. But it's really easy to focus on those downs. The same way we can look at Afghanistan, 20 years in Afghanistan. It's really easy. It's very easy to point fingers and look at all the downs. But there's a lot of good. And I think that's why, sorry for the sniffles, folks. I got my COVID booster and I'm like still dying. But when we talk about the Afghan episodes, the Afghan evacuation stuff, this is why I thought it was very important to at least put in a little bit about from the SOCOM softcast episode, where CCM Command Chief Master Sergeant Greg Smith, he's a senior enlisted leader there at SOCOM. On their 9/11 Afghan episode, they talked a little bit about how they felt about it. And I think Chief Smith puts it in perspective about this still having an impact, that we should not mourn the loss of Afghanistan because it's not over yet. We did a lot of good in 20 years. A lot of people had opportunities that they never would have had before. A lot of good was done. I don't think it's fair for folks to put it on their shoulders. I don't think it's fair for any operator, any Green Beret, any Ranger, any SEAL, any conventional guy, whether you're a cook, an infantry dude, or an admin clerk who served in Afghanistan, to say, well, my time there was for naught. It was a waste of time. It was in vain. People went to school. People were fed. People lived lives. A whole generation of Afghans knew a world. They got a taste of a world that they never would have got a taste of before. Is that enough? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But that kind of takes us to the next topic really quick, is GPC, Global Great Power Competition. And our withdrawal from Afghanistan definitely was a signal to the world about where we stand on the stage of great power competition. Jack, how do you think we stand in GPC after the Afghan withdrawal? Was this a sign to the rest of the world, to China, to Russia, to Europe, about where America now stands? Or is this like not that big of a deal in terms of GPC?
The hard truth, probably not that big of a deal. Even though the withdrawal from Vietnam was probably not that big of a deal for the overall Cold War and our ultimate, victory over the Soviet Union. Afghanistan is kind of a backwater as far as global competition is concerned. And I realize that sounds kind of callous in a lot of different ways, but I think that we withdrew from Afghanistan for our own reasons because we had been there for 20 years and not gotten nearly as much traction as we wanted. As President Biden said, it was a question of following through with the withdrawal plan that had been hashed out by the previous administration, which he supported, or surge troops to Afghanistan again for the spring fighting season. How many times have we surged troops and watched Americans come home in caskets for no clear reason, no clear end state or end goal? So I don't think we withdrew from Afghanistan because there was a reorientation towards great power competition with large nation states. I don't think that's why we got out of there. But does it lend itself, or does it signal that our priorities have changed? Perhaps. 20 years have gone by. We've changed as a country in a lot of different ways. China is on the rise. Russia is belligerent. So yeah, I mean, we are reorienting our posture. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And if you even just read the papers, you can see that we're still fighting low intensity conflict in Iraq and Syria, parts of Africa, but we're also talking about the Arctic. We're talking about the South China Sea. I mean, we are behaving a lot like an empire in a sense. We're deploying military forces all over the world. And I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are we playing world cop? And is that the proper role for America in the world? And I mean, that's a question that we're going to be asking ourselves through the remainder of the century, I think.
Suddenly the game of Risk doesn't seem like so much of a game anymore, does it? I mean, we're kind of doing that. Like, you brought up some great points here about the Arctic, about the Ukraine, about Kazakhstan, about low intensity conflicts. Africa is one of those situations, and I call it a situation because it's an entire continent of big question mark. China has been making its moves. The U.S. has been accused of allowing them to do such things. Let's talk a little bit about China. We did a whole future war series on China. We kind of opened the most of the beginning of the season, kind of opened up with that. We talked about national security implications. We talked about maybe some of the boondoggles of China. Now we started that show. I think we did that in July. Yeah, we did that back in the late part of July. It is now January 2022. A lot has happened since then. We are not engaged in World War III. We had the Chinese have not taken Taiwan, but the question is, yet? Are we still on the path? Are we still on the trail to war? What do you think, Jack?
Well, I hesitate to use the sort of like, what's the term I'm looking for? I mean, I hesitate to engage in like a self-fulfilling prophecy and make it sound like war is inevitable with China. I don't think it is, but it is also a distinct possibility. It's something that could very well happen, and we need to take seriously. So I would edge away from talking about like being on the road to war, but we are already engaged in a competition, a global competition with China, and that's a competition over which worldview is going to prevail in the next century. Is it going to be America and so-called liberal democracy, or is it going to be China and their sort of panopticon type of authoritarianism? That's the real competition. Whether or not it goes hot or not is something that is on everyone's mind, but I don't think it's inevitable.
I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting now that, this Blade Runner cyberpunk dystopian future is beginning to look better and better compared to our other options, But I look at China, and I worry about the way that we're going to handle this. I look at folks talking about, we got to go back to looking at force on force. We have to go back to, break open those old manuals and do it the old way. And I'm like, well, that's not necessarily the answer either. The way that we viewed force on force against Russia, the Fulda Gap and all this wonderful stuff is not necessarily the same recipe for a fight with China. I don't think that they're necessary. There's definitely some things that we have to re-examine, but I'm really worried about folks that think that we're just going to break open old books and just go back to as if pre 9/11 was the China solution. I'm just not convinced of that.
Well, no, and we know that it wasn't the China solution because pre 9/11, there were serious people who believed that China was going to democratize. So it was only a matter of time. We're engaging in all of these like technology transfer programs, even military technology transfer programs with China. I mean, the the pre 9/11 1990s era was not the solution, but rather the cause of many of our problems. So yeah, the past is in the past. I mean, we're not going to crack open a bunch of FMs from the Cold War to solve this problem. You can't have the past back. It's literally gone forever. You can only move forward into the future.
100%. And let's move back one more step, and that is woke. Probably one of our more interesting episodes in terms of the response that we got. This was back in early July. I think this was the first episode of the season, and we started the season off with something controversial, and that being what exactly was woke. And now, this is one of the situations where as a listener, I invite you to put yourself in a little bit of a time machine. Because 2021 felt like it was a decade long. It was the year that just would not freaking end. COVID, political upheaval here in the United States. We continue to kind of go through that. But 2021 was just, if all the things that happened in it feel like it was forever ago. So, put yourself back in your own little personal time machine. Go back to early July before the Afghan evacuation, before it felt like, the world was going to come to an end. Back in July, early part of this year, or early part of last year, I should say, there was a lot of talk about military culture. Part of it was extremism stand downs. Part of it was this idea of critical race theory. Being woke. Woke was a word that was being thrown around in the military. Woke military, woke this, woke that. The Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, was being criticized earlier last year for, and he and General Milley were kind of, pulled over the coals, raked over the coals on some of their positions on critical race theory, or even where race education came into play inside of the military. And we did an episode about what was woke. We kind of went back to the roots of the history of the word woke. We talked about critical race theory with experts who vehemently disagreed with the way that it was being treated in media. And I find myself often, when I talk about woke military, having to explain to folks like critical race theory isn't what a lot of the pundits and talking heads on television were saying it was, and it wasn't necessarily how we were trying to teach it. Or it wasn't even, nobody was trying to teach critical race theory in the military. What it ended up being was a DOD without a really clear roadmap or guidance on how to talk about race within the ranks. So it was like, hey, Lieutenant Murphy, put together a slideshow about, race and figure it out. That's not how you do it. I still haven't seen a whole lot of guidance coming down from the DOD. I still haven't seen a lot of officially sanctioned stuff. The only thing I ever saw was the extremism stand down slides that looked personally like nobody had QAQC'd them.
Yeah.
And that's not a good look for anybody. So since July, the military has changed. The DoD has changed. We have new priorities. The next shiny thing. But Jack, tell me tell me about some of the feedback that you've heard or the conversations that you've had since July about the woke military. Has it changed, or perspectives changed, or are people still like, critical race theory is what we're teaching and it's bad?
We're still talking about the woke military that's still out there. Critical race theory was like a little satanic panic of the 1980s that erupted in the country. But like, people are really not talking about CRT anymore. Yep. It was something that people were flipping out about like 6 months ago. I had people, even I know, telling me that the New York City schools are steeped deeply in this rot of critical race theory that they're propagandizing our children with. And like, I know what my kid is learning in school. I see the curriculum, and during the pandemic, I got to hear the classes because they were remote. So they're being done in my home over Zoom. And they were not teaching critical race theory to children in our schools, but we were told that they absolutely were all the time. And I guess I'm just too dumb to understand it. So critical race theory is just like one of those things that people were angry about for 15 minutes and went away. The woke military stuff is still around, for better or worse. I mean, it's very interesting to me. I was having this conversation over dinner with a friend during Christmas who is also a veteran. And I was telling him how I think it's really interesting that, like, when we were in the military, we were used to the military being attacked by the left. Because the left saw the military as like this enclave of far right-wing politics. So the military was always being criticized by these sort of lefty activists. Like, some of you who are a little bit older, you remember Michael Moore. You remember these sorts of personalities.
Wow.
and
went way back with that one.
Well, way back to the beginning of the GWAT, right? It's not that long ago. But today, the military is being attacked by the right. For the same reason, because the right sees the military as an enclave of extremist far left-wing politics, woke politics. So they're attacking even not just like officers, but down to individual soldiers that for whatever reason, they've decided they don't like this soldier because they're woke. And I'm not talking about like general military. Excuse me. I'm not talking about like General Milley. I'm talking about like General Donahue. God, I can't talk. I'm talking about like General Donahue when he was getting on the airplane and leaving Afghanistan last year. And I saw people on Twitter attacking him as like, screw this woke general. I was like, how do you know this guy's woke? How do you know anything about his personal politics? It's just like a slur that right-leaning people fling at service members now. And that's kind of bizarre to me.
Well, I think there are some parallels here between being woke, hashtag woke military, and some of the COVID vaccine stuff that we're seeing too. It's interesting because this is also the year that mandatory vaccines for COVID were mandated by the DoD, saying, hey, if you're a green suiter, you're going to get this vaccine. Lot of bucking to that. Lots of folks that were like, I don't like being told what to do, even though you're in the military, you signed up to be told what to do. I have expressed my own personal opinions about this. I'm vaccinated, but I'm not one of those people that's like, I'm vaccinated, and if you didn't, you're a piece of crap, or, you're a bad human being, you're a bad American. I think it's a personal choice. I've always maintained it's a personal choice, except if you're in the military. I think that, if you're in the military and you're told to get a vaccine, whether it's a smallpox, flu shot, whatever it is, you're supposed to get it. But some folks have disagreed with that. They've bucked that system. And now it's almost like if you did get your vaccination, your vaccine card might as well be your voting ballot. And I don't necessarily ascribe to that mentality, but that seems to be the new version of woke military. Is vaccinated military, or are you anti-vax? Vax? Are you, if you get the vaccine, does that mean you subscribe to CRT as well? It just seems like it's all kind of thrown into one big basket.
Yeah, well, it's that question of identity, right? And where political identity becomes the most important aspect of our lives. And for people, I think the stuff with the vaccinations, it's not so much about the science or the medicine for a lot of people. It's a question of defiance and say, hey, you can't tell me what to do and do what I want. It gets a little ridiculous though when you got like these Navy SEALs who are like they lawyered up and they're going to the courts so that they don't have to get their vaccines, and it's like on religious grounds. And I'm very curious to find out what religion said they could get all of these other vaccines they got when they joined the Navy, but the religion says, no, this one COVID vaccine, like, nah, that's a no-go, man. You can't get that one. I'm really curious to know what religion that is.
It's funny because like the whole religious exemptions and clauses, the original guidance was and again, this is all being mixed up between rumit and real information. Some folks were saying that if you didn't get the vaccine, you were going to be kicked out of the army with a dishonorable discharge. Not sure I ever saw anything official come from anybody that said that was going to be the case. I do know that there was religious exemptions that were being discussed. People were at the highest levels. They were trying to figure out how they were going to handle folks who didn't get the vaccine. They knew this was a controversial topic. It was a can that was kicked down the road for a hot bit. I still don't think if you didn't get the vaccine or if you choose not to get the vaccine that you're a bad person. These are personal choices, but at the same time, I don't think this says anything about you. I don't think it says anything about me. I think it's about, I chose to get the vaccination when it was offered to me. At the time, my elderly parents were living with me. My father has diabetes, a whole host of health issues. And I felt like the last thing this man needed in his 80s was COVID. So we took all the appropriate, like we were that family that was like, all right, guys, my parents lived in one side of the house. I'm like, you guys stay over there. We're going to get vaccinated. We're going to quarantine. And then we'll reintegrate with you guys. We'll get you guys their shots. So for us, it was a health decision, and it was a health decision that we made as a family. Like, hey, this is how we're going to go about it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to wear masks until this. And I didn't wear a mask because I didn't want to catch COVID. I wore a mask. So if I did have it, I didn't give it to my dad and my mom at the time. So after it was over, masks came off and we reintegrated. It was like normal. But again, this was personal decisions. But I just, I worry that this continues to be the next evolution of woke. And I worry what it's going to do to the fabric of the military. What's going to be the next issue? First it was race, then it became COVID. What will the next hashtag woke be?
Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be a next too. I mean, this has sort of become our national pastime, is the culture wars, right? So we have to come to be comfortable living in a politicized world where every issue is going to be politicized, from a global phenomena like COVID-19 down to which brand of coffee do we drink is politicized. So this is just the reality we're in.
Oh, that's true.
And people can get mad for 15 minutes about anything and everything, and they will. This vaccine stuff, I mean, look, it's not a part of my identity. It's not a part of who I am. Like, I was never really afraid of COVID because I'm young enough and I'm in good shape. It was never going to really hurt me, I don't believe. But I got the vaccine when it became available to try to stop it from spreading around. And I wear the mask when I have to, especially pre-vaccine, not because I'm afraid for myself, but because I don't want to like accidentally kill someone's grandma. That would suck. But it's not, I'm as ready for this to be over as anyone. And It's not a part of who I am by any stretch of the imagination. It's just something I did to get over with, right?
It's funny you mentioned coffee because I actually had a situation where I was discussing coffee with another vet, and he mentioned Black Rifle coffee. It's like, oh, that's the only coffee I'll drink. Only coffee I'll drink. That's my brand. I'm like, why? Why is that your brand? And it was this whole thing about what they stood for and their politics. And he's like, what coffee do you drink? And I said, I like Dunkin' Donuts. I like Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And he's like, well, why don't you drink Black Rifle? I mean, they're supporting all these causes. Proceeds go to these charities, and they stand for this, this, and this. And I'm like, honestly, I've tried Black Rifle. I didn't like it. And the look was, how dare you? It's not a slight against Black Rifle. I just, maybe it was that particular bag. Maybe it was an old bag. Maybe it was, I remember I tried it when I was in Iraq about 2 years. I'm sorry, Kuwait about 2 years ago. Somebody had it. I tried it. I was like, it's all right. I prefer Dunkin' Donuts. I like the hazelnut coffee. That's just me. But the coffee I drink is not symbolic of which aisle I vote with. Or, I mean, if they sold Black Rifle at Walmart where I do shopping, I might be more apt to get it. If it was cheaper than Dunkin' Donuts or tasted the way I wanted it to, sure. It's coffee. I really don't care.
Man.
But people do take it to that extreme.
I grew up, I'm like the Fight Club generation. That you are not the car you drive. You are not the contents of your wallet. We are all the same miserable assholes, or something like that. The line goes. But I mean, the point in the film or the book was that, we are not the corporate products that we consume. That's a horrible way to define yourself. I mean, we've talked a little bit about this issue of identity, about your military service, your political identity. I think defining yourself by like the type of cleaner you use to clean your countertops, or the type of coffee you drink, or the type of light bulbs you buy, like that's a horrible way to define yourself. Like we're more than that. Like we're a lot more than that, and we should strive to be more than that. So yeah, I absolutely do not believe any of us should be defining ourselves by what corporate product we buy. That's horrible.
And the thing is, these corporations, these businesses, small businesses, are going to take advantage of that.
Yeah,
they're going to tell you that their brand represents freedom, and you see that a lot in different products, especially. And I hate to say it, a lot of our brothers and sisters, veteran business owners. I'm a big advocate for veteran business owners, but I think you're creating divisiveness when you say that you're the brand of freedom. You're the brand of righteous left, righteous right, whatever it is.
Well, think about like so-called green products. Like this is a green product. Oh, yeah. So if you buy this corporate product, you're saving the world.
Yeah.
Wow. True. What an amazing corporate gimmick that is. Buy my to save the world.
I drive a Prius. And people are like, oh, you think you're saving the environment? Like, nope. I'll be honest with you. When I bought my car, when I bought my first Prius, my second Prius, the first time I bought my Prius, I didn't care about the environment. I still don't. I know very well where these energy cells are coming from, and the people that have been exploited to make them, and the environment that it's been carved out and destroyed by it. And I love these cartoons that are like, you might as well just be driving diesel because it's what's fueling the power to make those cells. I get it. Don't care. First time I bought my Prius was I was going through a nasty divorce, and I needed a car that I could afford, had great gas mileage, and that I could potentially sleep in the back of. When I got that first Prius, big selling point was, can I lay in the and when I put the rear seats down, can I lay in the back comfortably? And I could, and I bought it. And I'll never forget the look on the guy who sold me that car. He's like, "Are you serious? You think you might sleep in the back of this thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, it might come down to that, dude." And he was like, "Holy crap, I'm I'm going to get you a good deal on this, man. I'm like, yeah. But then I bought my new Prius, and I just did it because I really like the look of the car. It's small. At the time, we lived in DC. I could park anywhere. I didn't have to worry about height clearance and could I fit in the small space. A small car in DC makes all the sense in the world. And I didn't have to spend that much on gas. I didn't care about the environment. But you tell somebody you drive a Prius and they think that you're like some tree-hugging hippie. You love the world. Like, look, man, I love the world. I do love trees, but that's not my priority. Like, that's not my thing.
Yeah, Prius, Apple computers. It's the prerogative of all of these companies to create like a little cult around themselves, right? That you create this brand loyalty. But they're just tools. These companies don't give a shit about you. They just want your money. So buy what works and discard what doesn't. I don't understand why am I going to build my personality as a man around this corporate product? Like, I've never really understood that.
Like, if you're a veteran, you should own at least one grunt style shirt. Like if you're an MMA fan, you have to have owned one Affliction t-shirt at some point in your life. These are all things. These are all stereotypes that it seems like we're trying to live up to. We're forced to live up to them. We're expected to live up to these stereotypes. And I don't buy it, but a lot of people do. And the last thing I want to talk about, Jack, we didn't talk about it much during the season because it was a story that was still developing, but Marine Lieutenant Colonel gives it all up, resigns from the Marine Corps, based off of the his position that leadership should be held accountable for their actions in Afghanistan and whatnot. We never really got to talk much about it, but it just seemed silly to me. I'll be honest with you. I thought it was ridiculous.
Well, so like when we started recording this, like I was actually halfway through writing a little bit of an op-ed, I guess, about the Air Force special operator who wrote an open letter kind of blowing the whistle on, and he's quite specific in this letter on preferential treatment given to the first female going through the pipeline. And he has some very good point. Whoever wrote this letter anonymously, he has some very salient points, some fact checkable things that he writes in there. It's not BS to disregard. Scheller, on the other hand, made this sort of claim for like accountability, but it wasn't clear what he meant by that. My take on it was that he was just having a really bad day at work, and he mentioned that he lost someone in the explosion in Kabul. So he kind of seems like a guy who needs a mental health evaluation, really, and maybe deserves some sympathy for that. But what I mean when I say the canary in the coal mine is this the new thing? This sort of like performance art, the sort of spotlighting and showboating from service members in a way that we haven't seen before, that they know they can get political attention because of all the other stuff we've talked about on the show so far, the culture wars, political identity, because of what's going on in this country. They know they can use their military service to leapfrog onto the television screen and to make headlines. And so are we going to see more and more of this where any service member, whether they have a political agenda or they need a mental health intervention, has access to live streaming on the internet, on social media, and can jump on there at any time and say whatever they want? Is that the future? Are we going to see more and more of this? Because people are emboldened. They feel like they have the right to air their grievances publicly, say what they want to say, and whether they do or not, that's like a bigger question. But I do wonder if people, not just of any political persuasion or orientation, but anyone whatsoever, anyone who has some grievances they want to get off their chest in the military, like, is this the future? Is this what they're going to do going forward?
The canary in the coal mine. The hashtag woke. these are all things that are tied together. And this is what we talked about with the COVID vaccine. Big things start small. It starts with, I'm not doing this because I don't want to. I don't trust what I'm being told. And now it becomes maybe it evolves into theater, like you said. The problem is we can't. I'm hesitant to lump all of these things together because there might be a valid reason to stand up to authority.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a really good reason for a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps to throw their entire career away. I'm not sure this is the right one, but there could be a reason in the future that is the right one, that we need to really spotlight and cause national discussion. But we're not going to do it because we're going to point at these other issues and go, well, it falls into this category. He's also BS. He's also nonsense. And it won't be the case. And that's what makes me hesitant to kind of like dismiss some of the stuff, because I worry about what it's going to mean to the future. What kind of precedent are we going to set?
This is the challenge I would offer. And I agree that Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, I think he threw his career away really for nothing, because he didn't really have too much to say. My challenge out there to people in the military, especially people in a leadership position, is I'd say the next time a female soldier gets raped in your formations and some commander wants to just sweep that under the rug, pretend it didn't happen, let's out-process her out of the military as quickly as possible and move the predator to another unit or an adjacent platoon. The next time your command tries to do something like that, blow the whistle. Come out there and just say, hey, this is what's happening. It's immoral, it's unethical, and it's illegal. It's fucking wrong, and it needs to stop. So if you're gonna go bold, you're gonna go loud, and you're willing to sacrifice your career, do it taking care of the soldiers and do it for the right thing. Don't do it just because, you're having some sort of like you just because you had a bad day at work. I mean, do it to actually help the soldiers to your left and right.
The first video he did, I was like, oh, it's a little much. Then the second video was the one that got me, when he was like in the camper van with the chess pieces in the front. I was like, is this like some Da Vinci Code stuff? Like, are we supposed to look at the chessboard? What is going on here? And then the veiled threats of like, when I'm done with you all, you won't know what hit you. Leadership will be looking for places to hide. I'm like, nah, bro, this is a bad look.
It's delusions of grandeur, and then they start getting all the attention on social media, and they don't know what to do with it. They start getting emails from some producer at Fox News, and I mean, I've seen it many times, and people think they're going to be the next big thing, like they're the next big deal. They don't get that they're just being used. That's true.
And the sad truth is that a lot of folks are going to get used. A lot of folks are going to continue to be used. I agree. Blow the whistle. If you really feel like social media is the spot where you want to take a stand against COVID, vaccines, woke military, national policy on the Middle East, take a stand on what's happening in your unit. If that's what you really, if these are hills that you're willing to sacrifice your career over, then do it for the people to the left and right of you in your formation. Or feel free to email us at militarymatters at stripes.com. We'll be more than happy to listen to your story. Folks, that's real. That's legit. Listen, militarymatters at stripes.com. Feel free to email us. We'll investigate your story. We don't take these things lightly. Just go look at our past episodes. We put in the work, we put in the hours, we put in the time. And we both have I think Jack and I both have experience seeing things happen when we were in uniform, we're like, whoa, did that just happen? Somebody needs to say something about it. And unfortunately, the right channels aren't always the channels that listen. Sometimes you do have to take it a little bit further, and we're willing to look into some of those stories. We've got a couple of things in the on the back burner right now that we're looking into. So feel free to email us. Again, that's militarymatters@stripes.com. Jack, we're about to start 2022. We have meetings ahead where you and I are going to discuss the next season, how we're going to handle that. I think we're probably going to look at Russia. We're probably going to look at cyber, space, a couple of true crime podcast episodes that are, you and I have kind of discussed in the past. So we've got an interesting season ahead of us for sure. And of course, folks, we always want to hear from you. So we're on social media, Twitter. We're very active on Twitter. Go check us out. And you can also find Jack on Twitter at JackMurphyRGR. Jack, where else can people find you?
You can find me on the YouTubes or wherever you go to find podcasts, where I do the Team House, which is a weekly podcast with spies and special ops guys.
That's right, folks. Go check out the Team House podcast. I'm a fan. Well, you know what? I don't watch it, man. I get enough Jack Murphy on a weekly basis. I'm just.
Well, it is kind of funny that like I'm very involved in like producing podcasts, but I don't listen to too many of them. People always ask me for podcast recommendations, and I'm like,
I'm the opposite. I think I spend more time listening to podcasts than I do any other medium.
Really?
Wow. 100%. It's audiobooks and podcasts. I'm a very audio person. So I'm always interested in hearing, new suggestions for podcasts and whatnot. I'm going to do my own plug here. I am one of the producers for a show called Softcast, the official podcast for SOCOM. I haven't really discussed that much about them simply because I'll try and keep these two worlds separate, but it's the end of the year. And I do think that some of the work that is being done over at SOCOM is very important. Some of the shows that they're doing are very interesting. So kind of like along Team House lines, they interview people from the special operations world, both current and former. Powerful stories of resilience, powerful stories of what the real people behind the name SOCOM. So it's some very interesting stories. Go check it out, Softcast, the official podcast of SOCOM. Go check out Team House Talk. I've also got my own show over there at Connecting Vets, The Back Brief. You should also go check out connectingvets.com, a great organization. And of course, stripes.com. Stripes.com, this is the official podcast. This is the only podcast that Stripes, I believe, puts out. This is it. We are the flagship. Military Matters. So go check out stripes.com. And if you use promo code podcast, you're going to get 50% off your digital subscription to stripes.com. Stripes is one of those, it's been there forever. When you've been deployed, like Stars and Stripes was the newspaper that was always there. So go check them out, stripes.com. Got anything else for us, Jack?
No, man, I think that's it. I mean, it's been an interesting year and an interesting season, and I'm looking forward to see what comes next.
And we still have jobs, which is great. I want to thank everyone at stripes.com or Stars and Stripes Media for supporting Jack and I through this podcast. I know we tackle some pretty controversial subjects. And here's the thing, and this is honest to God, I've never been told by anybody at Stripes, do not pursue this story. A lot of folks think that Stars and Stripes works directly for the DoD, and that, I think that's the number one criticism I've gotten is like, you guys are shills for the DoD. Huge shout out to everyone at Stars and Stripes for their continued support for this entire season and for just being an amazing group of people to work with. And as always, thank you to Jack Murphy for his amazing contributions this season. I mean, this show has just been phenomenal with him on board, and we got another season to do. So send your suggestions, your emails, militarymatters@stripes.com. Shoot us some stuff on the old socials, YouTube's, emails, whatever it is that you want to do. I'm Rod Rodriguez, that's Jack Murphy, and we will see you at the next episode. Did you know that the Office of Financial Readiness has an app? Download Sense app. That's SEN $E. Sense app has the information you need for saving for retirement, building credit, creating a spending plan, or buying a home. FinRed has the tools you need. Download Sense app for tips on the go and follow at DoD FinRed on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.